Doctor Who just wrapped up its latest season with a two-part epic that promises to lift the curtain and answer all the questions we've been asking. Who is Ruby's mother? Who is the one who waits? Why is there a mysterious woman following the Doctor wherever he goes? And will Russell T Davies resolve the plot with yet another reset button? Since I wasn't available last week to review The Legend of Ruby Sunday, I've decided to tackle both that episode and Empire of Death in one slightly longer review, much like I did with the opening double bill just over a month ago. I think this works in my favour anyway though, as The Legend of Ruby Sunday is mostly just setup. I withheld a lot of my judgment on this episode for the finale itself, as there's no point critiquing plot elements and mystery teasing if you've not seen the conclusion for it. But with Empire of Death now out in the world, I think it's fair to say that most of this episode can very easily be written off. One of the big complaints I have with... to save myself repeating this ridiculously long title over and over again, I'm just going to call it The Legend, okay? One of the big complaints I have with The Legend is that the plot kicks into high gear for seemingly no reason. It's not that I necessarily dislike setup in Doctor Who, and I don't dislike the Doctor doing detective work, and I definitely don't dislike the Doctor turning to Unit for help. But I dislike the Doctor randomly turning up to Unit HQ, demanding answers to a mystery without any actual urgency for him doing so. It's recently been revealed that a cold open was cut from this episode, involving the Doctor and Ruby visiting a large variety of locations in a montage, in each of which they encounter the mysterious woman played by Susan Twist. I can really feel this loss, and I could before I even knew about this. It just felt like something was missing. The Doctor and Ruby just turning up to Unit and saying, "Hey guys, can you open up this mystery box please?" without any incentive to do so immediately made the finale feel somewhat contrived. The plot does move along smoothly after this, but the driving force for the plot is totally fabricated. Especially since the last thing we saw of the Doctor before this opening scene was him reeling from the loss of Rogue. Surely if there's any quest you're going to go on right now, it's finding Rogue, right? Well, I guess not. He also decides to throw in the additional element of find Ruby's mother, which again feels very shoehorned in. It reads as this is the finale, so the question of Ruby's heritage must be answered now, when realistically he could have gone straight to Unit after Space Babies or something. Thanks to the Devil's Cord, we have reason to believe that the Doctor and Ruby have been travelling with each other for well over half a year, and only now does he care enough to find her mother? As a side hustle no less, because he may as well use Unit equipment to find her if he's already using it for something else. Like, damn, what a bad friend. And no, faithful viewer, this totally won't result in an incredibly unsatisfying resolution that probably provides more questions than answers. Why would you ever assume that? But anyway, don't get me wrong, the TARDIS flying into Unit looked stunning, and seeing the new Unit cast was great. Shirley being gone was a shame, but Morris is a more than fine replacement in my eyes for now, and Lenny Rush was a very welcome addition to the cast. I thought they were pretty good. Although I'm not really sure why Rose is here, especially given she adds nothing to the plot in either episode she's in. She's literally just background detail. Which is especially a shame given that I was not happy with how Russell wrote her character beforehand, and to get this kind of negligence in the script yet again feels quite disrespectful and uncaring in my eyes. Now, everything with the anagrams in this episode, in hindsight, sucks. The promise of S-Triad Technologies, aka TARDIS Technologies, was a very exciting one. I spent the whole episode wondering who Susan Twist could be and what her plan would be, certain that she'd be some returning foe. However, it turns out that S-Triad is not what we should have been paying attention to, but instead the S and U of Susan and the tech part of Technologies, which forms Sue-Tech. Even though you have to completely swap out one of the letters to reach this conclusion. Like, did anyone like this? Especially all the confusion that Susan Triad may be the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan, who was referenced in The Devil's Cord so that the new audience would know who she is. Like, see, I knew that line wasn't for nothing, but this all seems like a rather contrived and convoluted way for Sutekh to announce his presence when, like, he could have just done the S triad equals TARDIS law by itself, because that would have drawn in the Doctor anyway. All this extra detail about Susan being named after the Doctor's granddaughter and the anagram of Susan Technologies being Sutekh was just so irrelevant in the end. At least the TARDIS anagram sort of made sense because Susan was a half being created anywhere the TARDIS itself landed, and it worked as a law for the Doctor in 2024, as I said before. Am I nitpicking? Normally, maybe, but these things are huge elements of the whole episode and its cliffhanger, which is supposed to be a hook for the next episode. A cheat anagram that makes literally no sense to be there is not going to give me high hopes for its follow-up, let me tell you. I will say that it was nice to have Mel be an undercover agent for UNIT investigating Susan Triad, and that whole storyline was rather entertaining, even if it was a bit baity. The jokes about Susan being a surprisingly nice billionaire and the not so obvious dig at a certain individual who bought Twitter were especially funny, and I'm sure the Theresa May dance will provide the internet with plenty of punchlines and edits. And damn, the way Susan completely transforms into this angel of death with half her face concealed by a protruding skull before reducing her closest ally to nothing but crumbling dust. Man, that was some good stuff. Another great hide behind the sofa moment for the kids watching, I reckon. It certainly shocked me and continues to look terrifying and awesome on rewatches, even down to the way her voice perverts, partly because of Susan Twist's fantastic line delivery. Wow, wow, wow. You couldn't ask for a better way to end an episode. Shame that it was lumped in with the rather lackluster Sutekh reveal. Which, yes, did genuinely surprise me and had me excited for the follow-up, somewhat, but like, was anyone actually, terrified by this? I hate to compare to something so blatantly different, but did this fill you with dread in the same way that the Master reveal in Utopia did? Hell, that episode even had a text reveal like the Legend did, and it still worked better. I chalk this up to the Sutekh reveal being nothing more than the opening of the mystery box. All season we've been asking who is the one who waits, and the surprise doesn't stretch further than that. It's just, oh, that's who that is, and it's not very accessible for people who haven't seen Classic Who. I know there's the additional payoff of it being the god of all gods, but does that really mean anything when the previous gods were so easily defeated? The Doctor can yap on about how scary and dangerous and destructive these beings are and how hard it is for him to stop them, but the Toymaker gets defeated by a game of catch, and Maestro gets defeated by the Beatles playing some more of their shitty music. So what does he have to be afraid of? At this rate, I'm sure Sutekh can be defeated by something as simple as, I don't know, tying a rope around its neck and pulling at it or something. Oh. With the Master's reveal in Utopia, you had the added aid of the Doctor's Lovecraftian descriptions of the Time Lords throughout 3 whole seasons of television, how mystical and mighty they were, how we humans could never understand such power as theirs, and how they all died long ago, with the Doctor as the only survivor, only to be left with the promise of another one, about to return, a promise that terrifies the Doctor. Even for viewers unfamiliar with the Master, this packs a punch. And Ncuti Gatwa can stand there and look terrified while Sutekh announces his return, but we have no reason to be terrified as an audience. If you've watched Classic Who, maybe, but even then it's probably more of a wow, that's surprising moment than a holy shit, I'm terrified moment. The other half of the episode is dedicated to Ruby's quest of finding her mother, and it's fine. I don't hate it or anything, but I'll make the same complaint I've been making for weeks now. I don't care, and I don't care because the show has given me no reason to care. In 7 weeks, I feel like I know nothing about Ruby other than the plot threads she leaves hanging. She can make it snow, and she doesn't know her mother. That's all. I see how emotional it makes her, and I see how it's a core part of her character, but in those 7 weeks the show has been on, I've had no reason to emotionally latch on to Ruby. She's been such a boring character who completely changes up depending on who's writing her, and it's not like 8 episodes would have ever even been enough to develop her anyway. Hell, look at series 1 of the revival. We'd have only just gotten to Father's Day now, which is the episode where I started truly caring for Rose Tyler as a character. The time window is cool and visually stunning, and genuinely a very ingenious visual effect created by a very talented team of people, and I was super curious to see why Ruby's mother was impossible to see, and why she was 73 yards away from the CCTV, just like the woman in episode 4 of this season, and why she was pointing at the TARDIS, and what the hell was surrounding the TARDIS, and how it managed to bleed through the memory and kill a unit soldier. No, like really, this bit was cool. Wonderfully atmospheric, very well performed, and very well delivered. But again, hindsight's a bitch, ain't it? I saw recently in an interview that a lot of the mysteries Russell T Davies has been generating for this season were solely for internet clicks and online engagement. And you know what? I can tell.
It's very much kind of internet age storytelling where...
And was that deliberate?
Yes, you just hope it'll generate content. It's kind of proved to be very popular. People are really taking off with it, and I mean behind the scenes in our offices, people are very interested in this.
It's so appallingly obvious that Russell did not have a master plan for this season, and that he was merely dropping in a bunch of shocking and confusing and intriguing stuff just so that people would keep watching and talking and reposting it. And this is not how I like stories to be told. I assume that goes for most of you. Despite the fact that I adore the television series Lost, its weakest element is easily that it had no plan ahead of time, leaving several mysteries and storylines to be resolved in lackluster fashion or just not at all. Universally, this has been acknowledged as a bad thing. Most of the mysteries were put in place by J.J. Abrams because it would generate an audience and spark a fan base full of people speculating and sharing theories and spreading word of mouth about the show, and the substance was nowhere to be seen. It was all just bait. Russell has baited us, and I'm sure most of you agree, because there is no way in hell that the reveal surrounding Ruby's mother was planned from the start. And if it was, I will genuinely be surprised. So, I'll discuss the main plotline of Empire of Death later, but while I'm on the topic, I really want to handle Ruby's mother, because it genuinely might be one of the worst television reveals I have ever seen. I don't mean to sound melodramatic, but it's genuinely that bad in my eyes. So across the season, we have seen some very strange things surrounding Ruby. She can make it snow, her mother seems to be able to literally change memories, she's practically invisible to unit technology, and most recently, she's able to terrify the literal god of death. And why is this? Well, we don't know, because she's just some random woman called Louise Miller. So, it turns out she scared Sutek because he just didn't know who she was. Plain and simple. But if he wiped out all life in the universe to the point that the Doctor and Ruby were the only ones left, then why would he care? It's not very consistent with how Sutek is portrayed in the classic series, and I'm not even saying that returning villains have to be written exactly like they were in the past. Of course, you can add new layers and nuances to suit the narrative you're writing. But did this add anything? Sutek's fear of Ruby's mother was just another element to the mystery of her, ultimately leading to a massive disappointment in the end. Inherently, I have no issue with Ruby's mother being just an ordinary woman. Hell, I preferred Rey's parents being nobodies in Star Wars, and it's clear that RTD agrees with me. But the fact that Russell sets her up to be some mysterious entity with superpowers, only to ignore everything set up about her so he can say she was just a random woman, is absolutely ridiculous. Why did the memory change? Why can Ruby make it snow? We have absolutely no idea, but at least we know what Ruby's mother was pointing at when the memory changed. Maybe this will clue us in about all those supernatural elements and they'll be built on in the next season or something. It was a signpost that said Ruby Road, because she was naming Ruby, even though there was nobody around to see her doing this. And there was absolutely no reason for her to so dramatically point towards a signpost. And also, We weren't even aware there was a signpost here beforehand. So this is a completely cheap and invalid plot twist that not only bends the established reality of the series to suit itself, but also disrespects the audience. It's very evident that the mystery came before the answer here. Russell's tactic of internet baiting mysteries may have worked for engagement, but it definitely didn't work for satisfyingly paying off his story. Now, I will say that the emotional reunion between Ruby and Louise in the cafe was actually quite a nice scene in isolation. Ignoring how ludicrous the reveal is, both Millie Gibson and Faye McKeever were wonderful in this scene, and the writing here wasn't even that bad. It's definitely the first time I felt remotely emotional regarding Ruby's character, and I must say that that was quite a refreshing feeling. It's a shame she's then written out of the show one scene later. Even with that out of the way though, I wasn't impressed with Empire of Death at all. In fact, I was never really on board with it. Starting the episode by killing the entire returning cast of this era and wiping out the whole universe, you may think this raises the stakes dramatically, but I'd argue it does the opposite, because even children are aware that there's going to be another season of the show. Even children are aware of the show's formula, that the Doctor always saves the day. So for both of those things to happen, there is now going to have to be a big reset at the end of this episode, which I am not a fan of, because it just means that this whole story does not matter. It was the catalyst for Ruby finding her mother, and that's about the only lasting impact of this story. Other finales by Russell, even if they ended in an insane Deus Ex Machina like this episode, at least had lasting consequences. Here's the list. The Daleks all get defeated, but at the cost of the lives of everybody aboard Satellite 5 except for Rose. Even the Doctor regenerates. The Daleks and Cybermen all get sucked into the void, but that also leaves Rose trapped in a parallel universe. Time got reversed and the Master was stopped, but the Doctor is yet again left as the last of the Time Lords, and Martha's family are scarred with trauma forever. The Daleks all got easily wiped out, but the Doctor has to lose Rose again after having just found her, and Donna has to lose her memory of the Doctor, otherwise she will die. Oh wait, never mind. The Time Lords get banished back into the Time War, but again, the Doctor has to regenerate. Russell at least understood back then that there must be a counterbalance to a happy ending like this. When the stakes are raised so high that the only way to lower them again is, in essence, a cop-out, the audience needs some emotional gut punch as a result of this so that it doesn't feel like a cheat. In Empire of Death, the Doctor defeats the most powerful enemy he has ever faced with a fucking rope, and with a click of his fingers, everyone who ever died is alive again, and Ruby finds her birth mother, and everyone lives happily ever after. And yeah, not even Ruby leaving the TARDIS counts here, because she's going to be back in the next season, at least as a recurring character. So... oh yeah, it's also a horrendous waste of Sutekh. I was really worried that bringing Sutekh back would undermine any threat he previously held. Being such a powerful adversary that was barely defeated back in the classic series, and having allegedly evolved into godhood since then, it was obvious from the offset that there would have to be some really contrived way to defeat him, because it sure as shit wouldn't come naturally. What I didn't count on was that he'd get like 5 minutes of screen time in the episode, and in that time he'd either just be sat around doing nothing, or he'd be ragdolled throughout the time vortex. Now, okay, he does just mostly sit still in Pyramids of Mars too, but there's a reason for that. He's imprisoned, yet he still remains an active threat in the story by orchestrating everything else that happens in an attempt to free himself. Even just being sat there, Sutekh is a great threat. In Empire of Death, he literally just sits there. He can't even extend his reach enough to grab the Doctor at close range. There's a cool moment where he manages to restrain and torture the Doctor by just using his mind control, but it lasts for a few seconds before he gets some rope strapped around him and he gets dragged away helplessly. What? Couldn't he just restrain both the Doctor and Ruby with his mind again? Or better yet, have Susan and Mel blow out more of his death dust? I counted this. He literally sits around doing nothing while the Doctor ropes him up, retrieves the TARDIS, and flies away, all of which takes a minute and a half. Like, seriously? The most powerful villain in the show? the only being that the Celestial Toymaker was afraid of, sits around for a minute and a half, doing nothing to save himself from a single strand of rope. I'm actually fucking done with this show. Listen, I'm so happy to hear Gabriel Wolf's majestic voice again. He's 91 years old and still delivering an absolutely fire performance, but I'm also disappointed that we didn't get to hear more of it. 5 minutes with this guy, and most of it is his character being treated like an absolute joke. Apparently, it took an entire species of Osirans to imprison him, and a single rope to fucking kill him. Yeah, no, I'll never get over this. And I'm still annoyed that his eyes are red and not green here. What the hell, man? Okay, onto the characters. Yeah, not much has improved here since last time either. I'm happy to see the Doctor breaking down and blaming himself for things across both episodes. It's one of my favourite traits of the Doctor's purely because of how tragic it is. This man goes around the universe doing so much good, but only focuses on the bad things he does. It's a great lesson for people to look outwards rather than inwards. We all see how much good the Doctor does, but he hates himself because he only sees the bad. And Ncuti Gat screaming at the end of the universe was truly harrowing. He brought an incredible performance to the show this week and enhanced the much needed depth he'd finally been given. Okay, that being said, I do have my nitpicks with the Doctor though. So all season, I've had my issues with the Doctor crying all the time. I know that sounds very toxic male of me, but I just mean it from a storytelling perspective. The Doctor has always been reclusive about his emotions, so when he does cry, it's very impactful. But people told me to just embrace it because this is a more emotionally mature and stable version of this character, which I sort of had to just grit my teeth and accept. But, turns out that was wrong, so you can't really argue this to me anymore. Unless you raise a really good point and actually can argue this, then, you know, fair enough. But Ruby's exit of the TARDIS at the end felt very cold and a bit heartless from the Doctor. The way he essentially kicks her out and has the audacity to not reciprocate "I love you" to Ruby, despite the fact that he literally said he loves Mel earlier on in the exact same episode, kind of proves that he's not as emotionally stable as he's made out to be, huh? Like, this is the exact sort of behaviour that Tennant's Doctor or McGann's Doctor would exhibit, so it just feels like regression. What's the point of wiping the Doctor's trauma away, only to have him still be the same fundamental flawed character? It wasn't for the purpose of character development clearly, so I'm guessing it was just for the soft reboot, which sucks. Other than the stuff with Ruby's mum, I felt nothing for her yet again. In fact, this episode presented a great opportunity for a rift to generate between Ruby and the Doctor, and it didn't happen, which was very disappointing. I thought the two would finally butt heads and almost ruin their incredibly merry friendship after the world ended, especially with Ruby's foster family having been killed, because Sutekh was only able to kill everyone because the Doctor had been travelling through the universe. This presented a wonderful opportunity for Ruby to go off on the Doctor, wishing he'd never met her, and wishing he'd never come to Earth, and maybe even damning him for abandoning his granddaughter, saying he would have been better off staying home with her instead of travelling and messing everything up. Of course, she'd eventually come to her senses, but this scene would have been so powerful for both of their characters if it happened. It could have even led to her departure at the end, with her saying that she wants to stay close to her family for a little while after nearly losing them forever, maybe even needing a break from all the danger because it got too personal this time. But alas, Ruby just remains a hype man for the Doctor, doing nothing in this episode but saying, "Don't worry, it's not your fault." Exactly like all of the 13th Doctor's companions, who were notorious among the fanbase for having no character traits except loving the Doctor unconditionally. It's just retreading ground that I thought we were finally past. I was hoping for some substantial characters in this era, and so far I found none. Well, like nearly none. There is one character in this episode who I think genuinely gets some great writing, and it's a fucking nameless character who only crops up for a few minutes so that she can deliver the Doctor a spoon. I'm amazed. This scene was genuinely quite touching in isolation. With the rest of the episode around it, it's honestly very out of place, and keeping this random side quest that had no necessity being here over other stuff in the season that was cut is honestly quite jarring. But the episode is due some praise, I suppose. Sian Clifford gave a wonderfully heartbreaking performance here. It was very sensitive and sweet, and I felt honestly connected to her for the 4 minutes that she was on screen. The writing here was also beautiful, with the references to memory dying and her delusions about her baby still being alive. God, it was bleak and it was wonderful. And I also loved Ncuti here. The writing for the Doctor was wonderful, his sympathy for this kind woman was truly beautiful, and Ncuti played it in such a lovely way. It might be the highlight of the episode for me. I also actually quite liked Mel in this episode. The way she clings onto the clothes of the Doctor she knew beforehand in the memory TARDIS was so sweet, and Bonnie Langford absolutely crushed the role this week. I really don't think I'm alone in saying this is the best performance she's ever given for Doctor Who. I really felt the pain within her as she was clutching onto her head and warping her face with anguish as Sutekh attempted to break in, and she was honestly terrifying when she transformed into a bringer of death. I also want to shout out the awesome filmmaking when she dies. The way this warm, dry building transforms into something so cold and bleak was astonishing. A perfect use of lighting and colour in my opinion. It definitely enhanced the scene to no end. Oh, and I liked seeing the Mavity gloves again. Yeah, that's as far as positives go. Everything in the memory TARDIS was honestly a bit baffling. I'm still confused as to how it all works, like how it was created and how it functions. I know everyone's going to chalk it up to some magic existing within the show now, and that's probably also going to be used to explain why Ruby can make it snow. And to that I say,
well, that's just lazy writing.
And also, to have the method to finding Ruby's mother be linked to what appears to be a deleted scene from 73 Yards is kinda bad. Maybe it wasn't a deleted scene, you know, maybe the whole callback is just Roger Ap Gwilliam being there, but wouldn't it have been so satisfying if a few random lines in 73 Yards about DNA sampling paid off in the finale? As it stands, it feels like it was just an element thrown in there. Maybe if the DNA sampling had been mentioned previously, 73 Yards wouldn't have felt like such a pointless episode in hindsight. Seriously, 73 Yards, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, and Empire of Death all feel mostly pointless in the long run, because they're all undone by a big reset button in the end. So what was the point? There's barely any character growth in Empire of Death, and there's not even any character growth following 73 Yards, and don't you dare try to convince me that the whole episode was worthwhile because the TARDIS's perception filter stretches to 73 Yards. That means nothing to me. I'm also confused as to how the Doctor, Ruby and Mel are even able to use the memory TARDIS and zip from place to place, considering Sutekh's Dust of Death stretches to every single time and place the Doctor visited. Like, shouldn't they be dead then? If all of time is dead, then they can't possibly be alive. I know there's a line in The Devil's Cord about how the TARDIS protects the paradox, so maybe that explains it, but it's still a weak explanation in my opinion, because that doesn't explain how Roger Ap Gwilliam was even elected and managed to carry out the DNA testing if the world ended in 2024, or 2005, or 1066, or literally any time in the past that the Doctor had visited. Oh right, yeah. It happened because of magic. Great. And come to think of it, how did the Doctor reverse death? Because he dragged Sutekh through the time vortex, allegedly bringing death to death, but like, Sutekh's mere presence doesn't bring death, does it? Like, he has to release his death dust everywhere. So the big reset at the end doesn't even make a lick of sense. And again, how did Sutekh die in the vortex when he's literally spent the last few millennia living inside it? And not only living, but evolving, like the vortex made him stronger? RTD said he cooked this story up when he was like 13, and I can fucking tell. And no, I will not talk about Mrs. Flood. The way RTD has been dropping the ball with his mystery box formula this season, I'm expecting her big reveal to be that she's the reincarnation of Adam Mitchell or something, and I bet the fourth wall breaks won't even be addressed in the future. Safe to say my hype for next season has shot down to 0. Just give me some Daleks going around shooting shit again, maybe that'll make me happy. At least they got a name drop in this episode. So, yeah, in my opinion, this finale sucks. Both episodes don't really hit hard in any way, action heavy, emotionally or otherwise, and honestly, it's not like this story even matters anyway, since the whole affair gets wiped away in the end with no consequences whatsoever. Maybe we'll see next season that the Doctor accidentally revived Gallifrey again or something by bringing death to death everywhere. If not, that's just some more wasted potential in my opinion. Even my boy Sutek with his godly voice couldn't muster up any excitement from me. I give The Legend of Ruby Sunday a 4 out of 10, and I give Empire of Death a very disheartening 2 out of 10. Better luck next time, guys. Thank you all for watching this series of reviews. I hope you all had a good time. Let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comments below. Did you love it, did you hate it, or did you sit somewhere in between? Be sure to subscribe and turn notifications on, as I'll be doing a full season retrospective very soon. And as always, I've been your host, Mr. Greaves. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Goodbye for now.